Listen to a true story about the Zodiac. Level B1, Oxford Reading University.
Many years ago, newspapers loved to give impressive names to serial killers. They called some murderers things like the Mad Butcher or the Night Stalker. Some of those names were worse than others. But the twist in the story comes when those criminals name themselves. One man used to leave notes at the crime scenes, calling himself BTK, which stood for Bind Them, Torture Them, Kill Them. Another killer once left a message saying he was the son of Sam. He said a demon dog owned by his neighbor Sam told him to commit murders. But why give yourself a nickname? Criminal researchers think that some killers want to be famous. They want everyone to remember them, so a nickname helps. Also, they don't trust others to tell their story, so they try to control it themselves. Just like the Zodiac, a killer who was very good at playing games and staying hidden, and who also had control issues. One evening in 1969, a woman named Betty Harden didn't make dinner. Today it might not sound surprising, but back then, it was unusual. It meant something was wrong. That night, Betty and her husband were too busy trying to solve a mysterious puzzle from a letter. 3 newspapers received a letter written in secret code. It started with the following words: "This is the Zodiac speaking." It also had a strange sign at the end, a circle with a cross in it. This sign would later be linked to the name Zodiac. The first known murder by the Zodiac involved a couple of teenagers. David Faraday was 17 and had moved to Vallejo from another town in California. He was in his last year of high school, an active member of the student committee and an athlete. His girlfriend, Betty Lou Jensen, was 16 and in the year below him at school. She was a brilliant, promising student. One night, on December 20th, 1968, David took Betty Lou out in his mom's car. They told their parents they'd be back by 11 p.m. Sadly, that was the last time Betty Lou's parents saw her alive. The young couple drove to Lake Herman Road, a quiet spot where teenagers often went to spend time together, away from curious eyes. They parked in a quiet area, close to a gas station, thinking they'd be safe there. Later, a woman who was on her way to Lake Herman Road found their bodies. Betty Lou was found away from the car. She had apparently been shot several times while trying to escape. Near the car, David was lying in a pool of his own blood, still breathing but in a lot of pain. The car had bullet holes in it. It seemed like the killer knew what he was doing. He had tried to keep them from leaving the car and shot them without wasting any bullets. He had obviously planned his crime very carefully.
Do you know the only place where you can learn English with your favorite movie heroes? Ewa app. Movie characters will teach you English grammar, words, pronunciation, and listening. All in one place. appewa.com.
Unfortunately, the Zodiac was just getting started. About 6 months later, he committed another horrible crime. Darlene Ferrin was a lively woman. She was married to a kind man and had a baby. On the 4th of July in 1969, she went out to meet a friend named Mike Mago. There are different versions of what happened that night. Some people think the pair wanted to buy fireworks and a strange car began following them. They tried to escape, but ended up in a place called Blue Rock Springs Park. However, Mike told the police a different story. He said they had planned to watch a movie earlier in the night, but kept changing the time. At 11:30 p.m., Darlene picked him up. They were hungry and wanted to eat, but Darlene wanted to talk first. So they drove to Blue Rock Springs Park. Sadly, soon after they got there, the tragedy happened. When the police arrived, they found Darlene's car with lights and the radio on. Mike was lying outside with gunshot wounds all over his body and bleeding from the mouth. Even though he was in so much pain, the police tried to ask him questions, hoping to find the man responsible for this. Mike could only give them a few clues. He said the criminal was white, young, big, and drove a brown car. This man didn't talk, he just started shooting. Darlene was still inside the car. There were 3 bullet holes in her body. They were both taken to the hospital. It turned out that Mike wore a lot of clothes, which probably saved his life. Sadly, Darlene didn't make it. Mike said the Zodiac just walked away after shooting. He thought he had killed both of them. The murderer then called the police from a payphone and reported a double murder. He told the police where to find the bodies and finished off by saying, "I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." Remember the code that Betty Harden and her husband Donald were working on? Before that letter, the two murders weren't in any way connected in the minds of the public. However, the Zodiac did everything in his power to become popular. He sent in the mysterious letter, and it was so difficult to solve the code that the police had to ask the citizens to help. Even though the newspapers only mentioned Donald Harden as the man who solved the puzzle, it was Betty who did the most important work. She looked at the complicated puzzle filled with astrological symbols and Greek letters, and an idea occurred to her. Since the letter was from a murderer, she thought he might use the words kill and killing a lot. And because he seemed to think a lot about himself, she guessed the letter might start with I. And she was right. Using these clues, Betty and Donald figured out the puzzle quickly, in just 1 week. The letter was really terrifying. It started like this: "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest. Because man is the most dangerous animal of all to kill. Something gives me the most thrilling experience." Even though the Hardens managed to figure out most of the code, there was a part they couldn't solve. There was a string of random letters at the end of the text. EBO riot emeth HPT. For years, many tried to understand what these letters meant. Even now, people online say they have solved it, but no one really knows for sure. It's a mystery that keeps everyone guessing. That was only the first of his many letters, and not the last of his crimes. The next one, probably the most well-known, involved Cecilia Ann Shepard and Brian Hartnell. On a warm Saturday in September 1969, Cecilia and Brian decided to spend the day together. They used to date but had lost touch because they went to different schools. They met up, and instead of going to the city, chose to relax by Lake Berryessa. It was a lovely scene by the water. The two were reminiscing about old times and enjoying each other's company. But suddenly the peace was broken. Brian heard the leaves rustling. Then Cecilia saw a man in the distance. The man had a gun. He wore dark clothes and a weird hood with a circle and cross on it, a symbol that would later be known as the Zodiac's sign. Brian thought it was a simple robbery and tried to negotiate with the man. But things took a dark turn. The man tied them up and attacked them with a knife. Despite being badly hurt, Brian knew he had to find help. He kissed Cecilia, promising to get assistance, and managed to crawl to the road where someone found him. Brian survived, but unfortunately Cecilia didn't. At the time, Brian didn't know that the man who attacked them was Zodiac. However, after examining the scene of the crime, the police found his signature. On the door of Brian's car, he wrote the date of the murder and added, "by knife." And then, to make sure everyone knew who they were dealing with, the killer made a call. "I want to report a murder. No, a double murder. They are 2 miles north of park headquarters. They were in a white Volkswagen Carmen Ghia. I'm the one who did it," he said. The next murder was the last one tied to the Zodiac. On a night in October 1969, a taxi driver named Paul Stein had a passenger that would change his life forever. Paul was just doing his job, driving around San Francisco. But sadly, he didn't know that his passenger was the notorious Zodiac. When they reached their destination, the Zodiac suddenly shot Paul and then took some of his belongings, including a piece of his shirt. The killer then vanished into the night. At first, people thought this was a simple robbery gone wrong. But then, a newspaper received a shocking package, the piece of Paul's shirt, and a frightening letter from the Zodiac. In this letter, he mentioned his plans of shooting schoolchildren, since they made nice targets. Some people saw the Zodiac that night. They noticed he was cleaning the inside of the taxi before walking away. They gave a detailed description of him. A man in his late 30s or 40s, a bit heavy, with reddish blonde hair, wearing glasses and a dark jacket. From this information, an artist drew a picture of the killer. This drawing became famous. People started guessing who the Zodiac might be. making wild claims about his identity, including some really surprising guesses, like Senator Ted Cruz, for example. The mystery of the Zodiac kept everyone curious and scared. The Zodiac might seem like a very ordinary guy. Perhaps he always felt left out and had trouble fitting in. Imagine a person who never felt in control of his life or how people saw him. Now, what if that same person decided to take control in a very dark way? To feel powerful, he began murdering people. He loved the attention, especially since he never got it in everyday life. He played dangerous games with the police and reporters, making them chase him. Through these actions, he felt in control, as if he was the boss of his own story. Among all the reporters, there was one named Paul Avery who was particularly interested in the Zodiac and wrote numerous articles about him. This made Paul very popular, but it also put him in danger. One day, just before Halloween, the Zodiac sent Paul a frightening card. It had a spooky skeleton and a chilling message on it. "I feel it in my bones. You ache to know my name, and so I'll clue you in. But then, why spoil the game?" There were creepy drawings of eyes on the card too. When people heard about this threat, they became worried for Paul. To lighten the mood, some reporters started wearing badges saying, "I'm not Paul Avery." Even Paul wore one, trying to find humor in a scary situation. After a series of terrible acts, the Zodiac mysteriously stopped killing. However, the stories and guesses about who he might be continued. Interestingly, many people believed that the Zodiac was someone from their own family. Maybe some wanted attention, or perhaps their families were toxic enough to suggest that. Arthur Lee Allen, a former schoolteacher from Vallejo, was under suspicion at one point. Even though the DNA analysis couldn't prove anything, many people still believed that he was responsible for the murders. David Fincher's famous movie also makes use of this theory. In 1969, a phone call made everyone's heart race. Someone claimed to be the mysterious Zodiac and said he wanted to talk to a famous lawyer, Melvin Belli, who had previously worked with big names like actor Errol Flynn and boxer Muhammad Ali. A TV interview was set up, and everyone watched it live. The man, who called himself Sam, talked about his headaches and even screamed at one point. It was intense to watch, but later they found out Sam was a patient at a mental hospital, not the real Zodiac. A few months later, Belli received a letter. The person who wrote it seemed upset and asked for help to stop killing people. It ended with these words, "Please help me. I cannot remain in control for much longer." There were two theories about this letter. On the one hand, it could be fake. Even though the writing looked like the Zodiac's, anyone could have copied it. On the other hand, it could genuinely be from the Zodiac. The writer could be making fun of Belli after the TV show. Everything the Zodiac had done before showed he enjoyed playing with people. Many believed that the letter was one more of Zodiac's cruel games, and he loved every moment of it. Serial killers stop murdering people for many reasons. Some lose interest, some take their own life, and some get so tired that they turn themselves in to the authorities. The Zodiac disappeared with no explanation. In 1978, he sent in his last letter, which some believe is a suicide note. The Zodiac, a once feared figure, had stopped. Maybe he had actually taken his own life, or perhaps he died of a disease. But the killer who once caused so much fear was now really frightened himself. All he could do was send empty threats. In the end, this man who always insisted on being in control was simply a coward.
Send this story to a friend who likes true crime. And now, listen to another English story.